Welcome to another Rich Habits, Poor Habits webcast. I'm Michael Yardney with Tom Corley in the United States. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, Michael, it's good to be back.
Now, Tom, I was reading your daily insights. I love them every day when I get it in my inbox in the morning with some rich habits and some success habits. And it was so good. I got you online and said, mate, let's have a talk about this. You wrote about the thinking actions of the rich. And you said there are only really two types of actions you can do that separate the rich from the poor. It's thinking actions and physical actions. What do you mean by that, Tom?
Well, so thinking actions are obviously the thoughts that we have, but it's what I found in my research is that wealthy people are positive thinkers, they're optimists, and that's important because if you're pursuing success, you need to be solution oriented, and if you're in a negative mindset, you're problem oriented. You're just focusing on the problem and not even thinking about opportunities or solutions that could come along. So that's one of them. I found that that's one of the reasons why the rich are rich and the poor are poor. The poor are negative thinkers and the rich are positive thinkers. The other thing about thinking, why it's an action, is it requires, at least from my research, the self-made millionaires, many of them were decision makers, right? And they were decision makers because they got into the habit of making decisions. So wealthy people, self-made millionaires, they develop or forge this habit of making decisions. They know that their decision is not going to be perfect because nobody has enough information to make the right decision ever. But they get over the fear of not making a decision. And what I found with the poor people, 98% of them avoided making any decisions at all. They deferred making decisions. They deferred them to others. And those others typically are called bosses. So they end up being employees for the rest of their lives because they don't want to be decision makers.
I found a couple of interesting things from that. Number one, you wrote that we've got about 50,000 thoughts a day. And I know all our minds keep racing. And some of those thoughts tend to be the same over and over again. And this is why the way you think and the habits that you've got make such a difference, because a lot of this happens at an unconscious level, a subconscious level, doesn't it, Tom?
It does. And I even cited the Psychology Today article on this. You know, the average individual has, the 50,000 thoughts a day. And guess what? 70% of them are negative. And then they scratch their head and they wonder, why aren't I successful in life? The self-made millionaires, the wealthy people, are positive thinkers. In fact, in my studies, they have 67% of the time they're thinking positive thoughts. So it's a complete flip. It's the opposite of poor people. And guess what? That's why they're not poor. They're the opposite of poor, which is rich. And a big part of that is their thinking, Michael.
Well, as we've often said, your thoughts lead to your feelings lead to your actions, and your actions lead to your results. So the inner way your mind works leads to your outer world, and that's why the rich people have manifest wealthy thoughts and take wealthy actions that make them richer. So, Tom, if now on reflection, people think, gee, yeah, maybe I am thinking too negatively, what can they do about it?
Well, the first thing is to become aware of it, right? And that's why I posted this. I wanted people to become aware of the fact that 35,000 thoughts that they're going to have tomorrow are going to be negative unless they do something about it. So
we know those sort of people, don't we, Tom? You come across them in your life, in all walks of your life.
I see them every single day. And I've seen them every single day my whole life. But now that I know what I know from my research, it's like every time I run into one of these people, I feel like, well, there's another toxic, negative person who's never going to make. I already know they're not going to be successful in life, but just because they are negative thinkers.
So I stopped your train of thought. Number one, to change your life is to become aware of your negative thoughts or your poor habits. Step two is to remove them. And step three would be to replace them with positive thoughts. Easily said, Tom. How do we go about doing it?
Well, what I found in my research, which is really something that's so cool And it's anything, it's something that anybody can do. Gratitude is the gateway to positivity. This is not Tom Corley saying this. This is study after study says the same thing. When you express gratitude every day for the things you have, you're focusing on what you have instead of focusing on what you don't have. So it's a mental shift. You're going from negative to positive just by saying, boy, I'm so glad I turned the key in my car and my car started. I am so grateful for that. I'm so grateful I have a half a tank in my car. I'm so grateful I got a good night's sleep last night. You know, these little things, when you express gratitude, you're actually forcing your subconscious to shift from negative to positive. And it's a shift that's going to take hours to reverse. So it starts you off in the morning, if you express gratitude, especially in the morning, starts you off on the right foot. And then if you just make a mental note and become aware of your thoughts, hey, that was a negative thought. I can't believe I stop myself, Michael, to this day. I can't tell you how many times a day, probably 20 times a day, from saying something negative because it's pre-programmed into me from years and years of having a bad habit. And I stop myself and I say, cancel that. And I say something nice instead. It's easy to do once you become aware of it.
I think that's great. And so therefore you don't gossip and you don't run other people down and you're actually pleased when other people are successful. Tom, I learned that lesson many years ago as well. So every morning before I get out of bed, I think of 3 things I'm grateful for. Now, it's easy to think of the same 3 things every time. And I'm not a metaphysical person, you know me, but I do know that I try every day to think of 3 different things that I'm grateful for because it starts my day off right. And interestingly, I end my day every night by thinking about what good things happened in that day as well. And when I learned those tricks from some of my mentors, I know it's changed the way I think. And unless you're grateful, Tom, you're never wealthy, no matter how much money you've got, how much real estate you've got, how big your business is or your stock portfolio. If you don't appreciate it, if you're not grateful, you're not wealthy.
If you're not grateful, you're not wealthy. And if you're not grateful, if you don't express gratitude, you're going to be negative. You're going to always be envious, and that's toxic, and you're never going to be rich. You will never, ever be rich if you're a negative person.
You may be rich, but you won't be wealthy, and there is a big difference, isn't there? So, Tom, that's some of the great lessons that if people get our book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits, they're going to be able to learn about the success habits of the rich opposed to the average person, and you can get that at richhabits.com or on Amazon or in good bookstores. Thanks a lot for your time, Tom, and look forward to catching up with you next week.
Same here, Michael. Thanks again.